Imagine this. You've worked for years, hustling, grinding, just waiting for that big break. Finally, it comes, thanks to a mentor who sees your potential and opens the door to stardom. You form a bond, a mutual respect with this person who helped shape your future and career. But then one decision, one wrong move, changes everything, and that bond is shattered, seemingly beyond repair. That's exactly what happened between Joan Rivers and Johnny Carson. For more than 20 years, Joan was a beloved guest on The Tonight Show. She was funny, sharp, and always made the audience laugh. And Johnny? Well, he was more than just the host. He was her mentor, the one who declared that Joan would be a star. But in a twist of fate, their relationship took a tragic turn, one that left Joan banned from The Tonight Show forever. So, what went wrong? How did Joan Rivers go from being Johnny's go-to guest to the one person he couldn't stand to speak to? Today, we're diving deep into the story behind one of the most infamous Hollywood fallouts. Buckle up, because this one's a roller coaster of career highs, devastating lows, and the decision that left Joan out in the cold. The Golden Age. How Joan Rivers won over Johnny Carson. To understand the fallout, we first need to travel back to the early days when Joan Rivers was just another struggling comedian trying to make her mark. The year was 1965, and Rivers finally got her big break on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Her debut performance was electric, a mix of bold humor and fearless wit that left the audience in stitches. But more importantly, she caught the eye of Carson himself, who declared on air, "You're going to be a star." For Rivers, this was more than just a moment of recognition. It was like being knighted by the king of comedy himself. This wasn't a casual compliment. It was a career-defining moment. The endorsement from Carson opened every door in Hollywood for her, catapulting Rivers from a struggling comic to one of the hottest names in showbiz. Soon, she was a regular guest on The Tonight Show and even became one of Carson's most trusted guest hosts when he was away. But as much as they made a perfect team on screen, there were signs that their relationship wasn't quite as close off camera. Carson, known for being intensely private, didn't let many people into his personal life, and Rivers was no exception. However, there was mutual respect and admiration, a sense that Rivers owed her rise in the industry to Carson's faith in her. Cracks in the foundation, the unspoken rivalry. As Rivers' star continued to rise, she became a trailblazer in a field dominated by men. She was the first female comic to break through in late-night television, which at the time was almost like entering a boys' club where only a few women dared to tread. Rivers was not only Carson's go-to substitute host, but also one of the very few comedians who could go toe-to-toe with him in wit and charisma. But behind the laughter and mutual respect, something else was brewing, an undercurrent of competition that nobody really talked about. Rivers' ambition was undeniable, and Carson's position as the undisputed king of late night made her role as his guest host feel like she was always the understudy, never the star of her own show. In the mid-1980s, Rivers started to feel the pressure of being in Carson's shadow, craving a platform where she could be more than just a sidekick. The turning point, a deal that changed everything. The defining moment that led to Rivers' ban from The Tonight Show was, ironically, one of the most exciting opportunities of her career. In 1986, Fox approached Rivers with an offer to host her own late-night show, The Late Show, starring Joan Rivers. This was no small deal. It was groundbreaking. She was set to become the first woman to host a late-night talk show on a major network. It was her chance to finally be the star of her own show, to build her empire on her own terms. But the dream quickly turned into a nightmare. Rivers later admitted that the decision to accept the offer from Fox was the hardest one of her life, mainly because of her loyalty to Carson. She feared that telling him would jeopardize the deal, and so she made a critical error. She didn't give him a heads up. She didn't personally inform the man who had given her the biggest break of her life. When the news broke publicly that she was going head-to-head against Carson with her own show, the fallout was swift and brutal. Johnny Carson's reaction. The betrayal that shattered everything. To say Johnny Carson was upset would be a massive understatement. He felt blindsided and betrayed by someone he had supported and nurtured in the industry. Carson was known to be fiercely protective of his territory and had a long memory for anyone he perceived as disloyal. To him, Rivers' move wasn't just a business decision. It was a personal betrayal of the highest order. He believed that Rivers had used him to climb the ladder of success, only to turn her back on him once she reached the top. In interviews later, Rivers tried to defend her actions, saying, "I didn't handle it well, I admit it, but I thought he would be proud. I thought he would say, 'Wow, look what I've created.'" But pride was far from Carson's reaction. According to Rivers, she called Carson immediately after the news broke, desperate to explain herself. But Carson didn't want to hear it. He hung up on her, refusing to take her calls from that moment on. It was the beginning of an unforgiving silence that would last for the rest of his life. The band that rocked late-night TV. What followed was perhaps the most dramatic exile in television history. Carson not only cut all personal ties with Rivers, but also enforced a professional ban that would last for decades. Joan Rivers was effectively blacklisted from The Tonight Show, and anyone who dared to associate with her risked falling out of Carson's favor. It was as if Rivers had committed the ultimate crime, the kind of disloyalty that couldn't be forgiven. This ban wasn't just a casual slight. It was a message to the entire industry. Carson had made it clear that there was no going back, no reconciliation on the horizon. And his wrath wasn't limited to Rivers alone. Any comedian or celebrity who appeared on Rivers' show was also given the cold shoulder. Carson's influence was so powerful that many in Hollywood chose to steer clear of Rivers to avoid his disapproval. The fallout, career collapse, and personal tragedy. Rivers' new show on Fox initially seemed like a dream come true, but it quickly turned into a nightmare. Ratings were disappointing, and the competition against Carson's well-established show proved to be an uphill battle. Behind the scenes, tension with the Fox executives grew, especially between them and Rivers' husband, Edgar Rosenberg, who was the show's producer. When Fox demanded that Rivers fire Rosenberg, she refused, choosing loyalty to her husband over her career. The fallout was catastrophic. Both Rivers and Rosenberg were fired from the show in May 1987, and the situation took a tragic turn when Edgar Rosenberg, battling depression and despair over his career setbacks, took his own life. Rivers was left shattered, grappling with both the loss of her husband and the complete collapse of her professional life. She was blacklisted from late-night TV, an industry that now seemed like a hostile land from which she was exiled. The long road to redemption. In the years following the fallout with Carson, Rivers had to start from scratch. With her indomitable spirit, she reinvented herself, turning to other forms of entertainment like daytime television and reality TV. She built a successful career in fashion, red carpet commentary, and even became a best-selling author. Rivers' humor became more self-deprecating, often referencing her own downfall, and she gradually won back the public's admiration through her resilience and unapologetic honesty. But even as Rivers' career thrived in other areas, one door remained permanently closed: The Tonight Show. For decades, the band remained intact. Carson retired in 1992, and even his successors, like Jay Leno and Conan O'Brien, continued the unspoken rule of not booking Rivers as a guest. It wasn't until 2014, almost 28 years after her fallout with Carson, that Rivers was finally invited back on the show by Jimmy Fallon. It was a triumphant but bittersweet moment for Rivers, who never got the chance to reconcile with Carson before his death in 2005. The legacy of the ban. lessons, and reflections. The story of Johnny Carson and Joan Rivers isn't just about a band. It's a cautionary tale about ambition, loyalty, and the complicated dynamics of mentorship. Rivers' rise to the top was facilitated by Carson, but her desire to step out of his shadow ultimately led to her downfall. For Carson, the betrayal was a wound that never healed, and he chose to maintain his silence rather than forgive. In reflecting on their relationship, Rivers often spoke of Carson with a mixture of admiration and sadness. She respected his talent and credited him with jump-starting her career, yet she never shied away from criticizing his inability to let go of the grudge. As Rivers once said, he was the best and the worst of times. A clash of titans that redefined late-night TV. The rift between Johnny Carson and Joan Rivers was more than just a personal dispute. It was a seismic event that reshaped the landscape of late-night television. Rivers broke barriers as the first woman to host a late-night talk show, but it came at a steep price. Carson's ban on Rivers wasn't just an act of professional retaliation. It was a testament to his influence and the fiercely competitive world of late-night television. Even though Rivers' exile from The Tonight Show was a painful chapter in her life, her legacy as a comedy pioneer remains undeniable. She proved that sometimes the very act of breaking boundaries can come with a cost, but the courage to rise again is what truly defines greatness. So, let this clash of two titans serve as a reminder to all those who dare to challenge the status quo. With ambition comes sacrifice, but in the end, it's what we do after we fall that truly defines us.